Sports supporters, well, we've got the continued fallout from the Indiana Fever loss to the Dallas Wings at home in the home opener to a team that won 10 games last year. The fallout is getting the fandom getting loud. By fandom, I mean Caitlyn Clark fandom. You had a lot of things coming out of that. You had the great mystery of back injury. Is it a back injury compensating for something else? Was it a hip flexor? Was it a...
There's a single moment that tells you everything you need to know about where the Indiana Fever stand right now. Late in the fourth quarter of their home opener, with the season on the line, with 17,000 fans watching, with the biggest spotlight in the history of women's basketball shining directly on Indianapolis, head coach Stephanie White turned to her coaching staff and asked a question that should send chills down the spine of every Fever fan who heard it. What do you think they're going to run here? That was not strategy. That was not chess. That was a head coach, in the most important moment of her Indiana Fever tenure, asking her assistants for answers she should have already had. That was panic dressed up in a business casual blazer. And the fan base noticed. Every single one of them noticed. Because here is the brutal truth that nobody in official Fever media wants to acknowledge right now. The people who filled that arena, the people who bought those tickets, the people who drove from across the state and across the country to watch this team, they saw this coming. They warned about it. They were dismissed as casual fans, as people who do not understand basketball, as noise to be managed and minimized. And then they watched every single one of their fears play out in real time against a Dallas Wings team that won.
I think I stressed enough in my reaction video yesterday is the second team, the second unit, the bench is not good. It's not. I said yesterday, I watched the Liberty play the other day. The game had gotten so far away, they had their second unit. Their second unit would beat the living shit out of our second unit. They'll run us out of the building if we're not careful.
They won 10 games last season. 10 games. Let that number sit with you for a moment. The Indiana Fever lost their home opener to the Dallas Wings. Not in a close, competitive game where you could point to a few key possessions and say, if only we had executed better in those moments. No, this was a systematic, comprehensive failure on both ends of the floor. The Wings shot their way to over 100 points against a team whose entire identity, whose entire off-season sales pitch was built around defensive toughness and a new culture. The defense that was supposed to be the foundation of the Stephanie White era, it looked 100 times worse than what the Fever put on the floor last season. Open shot after open shot found its way to Wings players. Careless fouls sent Dallas to the free throw line over and over again, with foul trouble mounting within the first 10 minutes of the game and never really going away. The defensive rotations were confused. The communication was absent.
Oh, I was having a conversation behind the scenes and we were talking about automatic wins. The only automatic wins we could think of behind the scenes in a conversation between 3 or 4 of us was the sun and the fire as automatic wins against this team. Everybody else got a chance. To be real, you know.
The effort was there in flashes, but effort without a system is just organized chaos, and that is exactly what Indiana gave its fans on opening night. On offense, the situation was somehow even more concerning. Caitlyn Clark, the player who drove record-breaking attendance, record-breaking television ratings, and the most watched season opener in the history of this league, spent significant stretches of this game playing off the ball. The offense that was supposedly built to complement her skill set left her isolated, left her getting physically beaten up with no screens being set on her behalf, left her searching for rhythm in a system that does not seem designed around what makes her extraordinary. Watch any film from her time at Iowa. Watch how the offense was constructed. Screens were set. Spacing was created. Teammates understood their roles and executed them in service of maximizing what Clark does better than almost anyone who has ever played this game. Now watch her in a Fever uniform. The contrast is not subtle. It is not a matter of adjustment period or early season chemistry. It is a philosophical gap between a coaching staff that knows how to build around elite offensive talent and one that apparently does.
Here we go. So the Fever posted this, the final score. Holy hellfire. I mean, 1.5, 1.6 thousand likes to nearly 400 comments. That is not the ratio that you are trying to see. Fire White, no size playing CC off ball. She does what she does, not work. Then talks trash about Caitlyn Clark fans. Look in the audience, what do you see?
It's not. When the Fever posted their final score on social media, something remarkable happened. The ratio of likes to comments told the entire story of where this fan base is emotionally. Approximately 1,500 to 1,600 likes against nearly 4,000 comments. That is not engagement. That is revolt. That is a community of people who showed up with hope and left with grievances, and they were not keeping those grievances to themselves. Scroll through those comments, and you find a roadmap of everything that went wrong. Fans pointing out that Aaliyah Boston, a former college standout who was supposed to anchor the front court, grabbed only 4 rebounds in a home opener. 4 rebounds. Fans demanding to know why Raven Johnson, who has shown genuine promise, is not receiving more playing time. Direct, specific calls to cut or trade players who are providing nothing on either end of the floor. And threading through all of it, the same question repeated in 100 different ways. Why is nobody setting screens for Caitlyn Clark when she is getting physically abused on every possession? These are not casual observations from people who stumbled into basketball fandom.
Like we haven't spent the last 6 decades watching the best basketball on earth. We know what it's supposed to look like. Yeah, I mean, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s of the NBA, you know what real good basketball is supposed to look like. Find a coach that can build around Clark, manage Mitchell, or trade her. Make this team something people wants to watch. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Messy. The Wings shot their asses off. I'm not worried. Okay. And there they go again, not me.
6 months ago. These are fundamentals. Basic, non-negotiable elements of competitive basketball that were absent from the Indiana Fever's performance in their most important game of the early season. When the general public is identifying these problems from their couches, and the coaching staff is asking each other what the opponent might run, you have a genuine crisis of basketball competence. Here is a reality check that cuts to the heart of how serious this situation is. The Indiana Fever's second unit is not just below average. It is not just a work in progress. It is categorically, demonstrably outmatched by the second units of legitimate contenders in this league. Consider the New York Liberty. Watch their second unit play. Watch how they move, how they communicate, how they maintain the system and the spacing that makes the Liberty one of the premier teams in women's basketball. Now imagine that second unit playing against Indiana's bench. It would not be close. It would not be competitive. The Liberty's reserves would run the Fever's backup players out of the building, and that is not a hot take or an exaggeration born of frustration. That is an honest assessment of the talent gap that exists right now between what Indiana has constructed and what genuine championship contenders look like. And this connects directly to the roster construction decisions that fans were screaming about all offseason. The Fever came into this season overloaded.
Coach of the century. Oh, snap. Not the Joker. Not the Joker. You forgot the 80s leather jacket that continues to show up. That continues to show up like this is a bad 80s music video. Have to play more defense. They let the Wings get a lot of open shots. And then you have Dantis fouls within 10 minutes that kept Wings players going to the lines. Stephanie White asking anyone, what do you think they're going to run? Because she has not a clue.
With guards. They have guards stacked on top of guards in a roster that desperately needed length, versatility, and the kind of positional size that allows you to compete on the defensive glass and protect the rim. Those concerns were raised. Those concerns were dismissed. Now those concerns are walking around Lucas Oil Stadium in Wings jerseys, celebrating a road win against a team that should have been a guaranteed loss. Let us talk about Stephanie White with the honesty this situation demands. Her previous head coaching stop was at Vanderbilt, where things did not end particularly well. She arrives in Indiana promising transformation, promising a defensive identity, promising the kind of culture that turns franchises around. Those are big promises to make. They are even bigger promises to keep when your first major test is a home game against one of the weakest opponents on your schedule. The clip of her taking off her headset and her glasses during a timeout tells you something important. That is not the body language of a coach who has a plan and is executing it. That is the body language of someone watching a situation spiral beyond their control in real time. And the follow-up question about what the opponent might run cements
trash defense, uncoordinated offense, a lot of work to do. Boy, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you now. Defensive-minded players made sure that the defense became 100 times worse than last season. Honestly, it's pretty clear to say fire Stephanie White. How the hell does AB only got 4 rebounds? Why is Raven Johnson not playing more minutes? MHA and DD are effing trash. Cut or trade them. They do nothing. Give Caitlyn the effing ball. Why does no one on the Fever set screens for Caitlyn when she is literally hacked all night and nobody cares? Very pathetic, Fever. I hope either Caitlyn Clark quits on you, you lose every game.
It's what that body language was already communicating. The coaching staff did not have answers in that moment. They were looking to each other for solutions they had not prepared for. To be fair, one bad game does not make or break a coaching tenure. Adjustments happen. Teams improve. Early season losses have been overcome before. But the manner of this loss, the specific failures it exposed, and the questions it raised about the fundamental competency of the game plan, these are not things you can wave away with appeals to patience and process. Adding another layer of anxiety to an already anxious fan base is the mystery surrounding Caitlyn Clark's physical condition. During the broadcast, information emerged about some kind of physical complaint, but the details kept shifting. Back injury, hip flexor, groin issue, precautionary. The language changed depending on who was talking and when they were talking. Here is why that matters beyond the immediate health concern. Clark spent significant time in this game getting physically punished. Body contact on drives, minimal protection from officiating, and not a single teammate fighting through screens to give her cleaner looks. When your star player is getting beaten up all game, and then there is vague, inconsistent reporting about some kind of injury, the fan base is not being paranoid when they connect those dots. They are being reasonable. The question of how this organization manages Clark's health and workload is going to be scrutinized all season. It was scrutinized last season. And nothing about the home opener suggested that the situation has been thoughtfully addressed in ways that should give fans confidence. There is a narrative that has floated around in certain corners of WNBA media that dismisses Caitlyn Clark fans as casual observers who do not really understand the sport. That these are interlopers who showed up for a celebrity and cannot appreciate the nuance of professional women's basketball. This narrative is not just wrong. It is counterproductive, and it is disrespectful. Many of the people who make up the core of the Caitlyn Clark fan base grew up watching basketball in the 1980s and 1990s. They watched the NBA during its greatest era. They understand offensive flow, spacing, pick and roll execution, defensive rotations, and player development better than most people giving interviews about it. They spent 2 years watching Clark at Iowa play some of the most brilliant offensive basketball this country has seen at any level. They know what elite looks like because they have seen it up close for years, and they just watched 2 seasons of it in the college game. When these people look at the Indiana Fever and say something is broken, they are not expressing blind loyalty to a celebrity athlete. They are making basketball evaluations based on decades of watching the sport at its highest levels. Dismissing that knowledge base as ignorance is not just wrong, it is a strategy for alienating exactly the audience that gave the WNBA its most watched season opener in league history. Step back from the Fever specifically for a moment and look at what happened in Indianapolis from the perspective of the WNBA as an institution. The league just set a record for season opener viewership. The Indiana Fever had a sold-out arena. National media was watching. This was the moment to prove that the momentum from last season was sustainable, that the product had grown to match the attention, that women's basketball had arrived at a new level and was not going to waste the platform. Instead, the marquee team, the team carrying the commercial weight of the league on its back, lost to a 10-win team while looking confused, outmatched, and disorganized. The star player spent time getting physically beaten without protection. The head coach was asking her staff what play the opponent might run in the closing minutes. And the social media reaction was a ratio that marketing departments have nightmares about. This is not just a Fever problem. This is a league-level concern. When the biggest draw in your sport has a disastrous home opener that sends the fan base into revolt, that is a storyline that follows the league all season. Every subsequent loss gets amplified. Every misstep gets contextualized against opening night. The window to correct course is narrowing with every game. Perhaps the most alarming signal in the immediate aftermath of this loss came from fans declaring they were done. Not just frustrated fans venting on social media and coming back next game. Fans who explicitly stated they were switching allegiances. One commenter announced they were now a Washington Mystics fan. Others predicted Clark would eventually quit on the organization, or that losses would simply pile up until the season became irrelevant. These are not trolls. These are not random accounts farming engagement. These are people who showed up with genuine investment in this team, who bought into the promise of something special, and who watched that promise get broken in the first meaningful test of the season. When fans begin genuinely redirecting their loyalties after one game, you have moved beyond normal early season skepticism. You are now dealing with a credibility problem. Credibility problems in professional sports are not fixed with press releases or one good performance. They require sustained evidence that something is actually different. And right now, there is no evidence of that. So where does this leave the Indiana Fever going forward? The organization faces a series of questions that cannot be avoided and cannot be answered with optimistic spin and appeals to trusting the process. Is the roster built in a way that can actually compete against legitimate playoff teams, or were the off-season construction decisions as flawed as the critics suggested? Is Stephanie White capable of building and executing an offensive system that maximizes what Caitlyn Clark offers? Or is the philosophy of this coaching staff fundamentally incompatible with getting the most out of the most important player in women's basketball? Is the bench going to remain a liability that opponents can exploit throughout the season, or is there a development path that gets those players to a competitive level? And perhaps most critically, does the front office understand the urgency of this moment, or are they going to treat this as one bad game and wait to see how things develop over a longer sample size? Because the fan base is not waiting. They have already made their initial judgments. They already came into this game with concerns, and they watched those concerns confirmed. The margin for error here is not as large as it would be for a franchise without this level of national attention and fan investment. There is a version of this season that still exists where the Indiana Fever right their ship, where the coaching staff makes adjustments, where the roster finds its chemistry, where Clark gets the offensive infrastructure she needs to thrive, where the defensive identity that was promised actually materializes. That version of this season is possible. But the window for reaching that version is closing fast. The fan base that filled that arena, the people who drove hours to be there, the viewers who tuned in to watch the most watched season opener in league history, they came with hope and they left with questions. Questions about the coaching. Questions about the roster. Questions about whether the people making decisions in Indianapolis understand what they have in Caitlyn Clark and what it means to build around talent of that magnitude. Those questions will not be answered by reassurances or by calling concerned fans casual observers who do not understand the game. They will only be answered by what happens on the floor. The clock is ticking. The comment sections are already in revolt. The allegiances are already shifting. And somewhere in Indianapolis, there is a coaching staff that needs to find answers before the next game that they could not find in the closing minutes of the last one. The most important question in women's basketball right now is simple. Is the Indiana Fever organization capable of recognizing that this is a crisis? Or are they going to call it one bad game and learn nothing from the moment when everything they were warned about came true in front of 17,000 people and a watching nation? The fans already know what they saw. Now they are waiting to find out if the people running this franchise see it too. Stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for more updates.